The prospect of a federal jobs guarantee is gaining steam among Americans. That, according to a New York Times Gallup survey back in November, they found 93% of those surveyed supported some sort of federal government jobs program. That was last used, of course, during the Great Depression. Last week, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley introduced a bill promoting a federal jobs guarantee, saying the resolution would, quote, affirm the right to meaningful, dignified work and a living wage.
Here to discuss the merits and all the policy around that, author of The Case for a Job Guarantee, Levy Economics Research Scholar and Associate Professor of Economics at Bard College, Pavlina Tcherneva. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Absolutely. So let's start a little bit with your book. Well, I also know that you helped, draft some of this, or the press release or whatever around this legislation with Ayanna Pressley. I'm curious. There's never seen a time that this type of program could be more popular. I mean, I don't know anything else that would unite 93% of Americans. Not necessarily the policy that you're proposing, but at least in its spirit. And yet we see very little discussion of that here in Washington. Why do you think that is?
I think we have forgotten a promise that we made to the American public back in the New Deal days. If you remember, the New Dealers were very clear. Economic security requires two components: guaranteeing employment for those who cannot find it otherwise, and income support for those who cannot work. So we never delivered on the first promise, and FDR articulated the right to a job in the Economic Bill of Rights. That conversation, of course, was picked up during the civil rights era because our civil rights leaders understood you cannot have freedom without a job. It was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And so we've been engaged in this conversation for a very long time. And Representative Pressley is carrying on this torch and reminding us that we have some unfinished business.
Professor, can you tell us some of the details of that resolution from Congresswoman Pressley, since you're involved in drafting it?
Yes, it's a statement that is going to translate into a specific bill. But the three important components we want to keep in mind are the following. First, that it offers a legally enforceable right to employment, meaning that if somebody is not able to find employment and they're looking and they're sending resumes, they have a claim to the government to provide that missing employment opportunities. So it's the legally enforceable right to employment. The second component, that these would be public service jobs, that if the public sector is shouldering the burden of creating employment, it should also fill some needs gaps. And finally, that this will be publicly funded. Again, this is an employment safety net. And like all safety nets, the public sector is responsible for providing the support. It already provides the support to the unemployed and addresses the various social and economic problems associated with it. So the claim here is that we can do better. We can just give people meaningful opportunities to participate in our economy.
Mm-hmm. So how does that work in terms of partnership with the private sector, public sector, what kind of jobs, et cetera? I can already see, some of the attacks and more. What is the affirmative case from a, rising wealth standard for doing something like this?
Well, we can't really have an improvement in wealth and opportunity if people don't have a foot in the door. Mm-hmm. And so the private sector is, goes through ups and downs. And we know and we realize that even in the best of times, we don't have enough employment opportunities for all seekers. And so what happens? Firms have to make a choice who to hire. And we see that there are disparities in these employment opportunities. We know that the unemployed tend to be people of color, caregivers who have left the labor market to take care of elderly or young ones. People who have had gaps in their work experience have the hardest time getting into the labor market. So if I'm a firm, if I'm an employer, I would probably not be eager to hire somebody who's been out of a job for a long time. And the public sector can really fill this gap, provide that on-the-job training, employment opportunity, and say, hey, it's much better to have somebody who is actually contributing to the economy than have them seek and not find that employment opportunity. So how would it work is we're going to simply convert the unemployment offices into genuine employment offices. If you go into the employment office, there will be a menu of options of jobs that's missing today.
How do you think that would change society? Because one of the tools of sort of social control is the sense of desperation, the sense that there's not enough to go around, the sense of scarcity, sense that you got to take the $7.25 an hour job because you got no other choice. If you have a job bank with $15 minimum wage, good, decent jobs, that seems like that changes the societal landscape in a lot of ways that frankly could be hard to predict.
Well, it will change the landscape, and I think for the better. I mean, do we want a society where people are struggling, where they cannot find employment, or when they find that employment, that is unstable and poorly paid employment? I think, yes, first and foremost, this is a moral claim that we believe that if anyone is participating, they shouldn't be doing or want to participate, they shouldn't do it under duress. But second, we would like to establish some basic standards. What does it mean for somebody to have a good job, to be able to support a family? One job perhaps should be enough, and at a minimum, it should pay a basic living wage. Then the argument on whether we should use the threat of unemployment to discipline workers into whatever conditions are provided to them, that doesn't work. We know actually from good research that people who have job security are better workers. They're more productive workers. All around, an economy that operates at full employment is a better economy for everyone concerned than an economy that tolerates mass unemployment.
And so what happens next? We've had the resolution introduced, and you said this is going to lead to a draft of a bill. When could we expect that? What do the next steps look like?
My understanding is that there is a bill in the works right now. I'm not quite sure of the time frame. I think that they're looking for some co-sponsors in the Senate. I find this to be extremely encouraging because this is leadership that is also supported by a very broad coalition of supporters for the job guarantee. We're talking about all corners of civil society, small community groups. We're talking about big institutions. We're talking about unions. We're talking about policymakers. There is a lot of support galvanizing around this idea. And it is an idea that has been polled for very, very many years. It's just it has not been front and center in our political discourse. And when you poll the public, the support is there and it's bipartisan. So I think the time is now.
Yeah, 93%. Still amazed by that poll figure. Thank you very much, Professor, and congratulations on participating in this bill. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, New York Assemblyman Ron Kim. He's going to weigh in on Andrew Cuomo's nursing home cover-up and the phone call that went viral. That's when Rising continues.